I'm just a simple guy from Storm. Always wake up early in the morning and do my lovely job like my daddy and his daddy used to do. But lately things have been falling apart, making me job much harder. Well, at least I'll get paid. Death knows how to keep his pipeline in check. The juicy benefits are nice and all, but for me, a handful of crypto coins is all I need to keep me shovel polished. To buy me some guns. And even bigger guns. And to maybe play some cards with fate. So that one day I can kill the baddie who butchered my daddy. Okay, Boomer, let's put the fun back in funeral. I'm just a simple guy from Storm. Always wake up early in the morning and do my lovely job like my daddy and his daddy used to do. But lately things have been falling apart, making me job much harder. Cheating death by all means seems to be all the rage these days. You work your arse off to provide them with proper final accommodations, and those ungrateful wretches start getting refunds on your work. Ugh, did I not bury you already? The poor bastards have no idea they're just being played by none other than my father's murderer, Bloody Kieran Husk, and his anti-death movement, making a profit from the pathetic losers' fear of dying. Well, at least I'll get paid. Death knows how to keep his pipeline in check. The juicy benefits are nice and all, but for me, a handful of crypto coins is all I need.
Gravelord Early Access Review, a return to the roots of first-person shooter. If you miss the shooters of the 90s, don't miss Gravelord. If you've been following the video game world closely over the past few years, you'll know that classic first-person shooters, also known as boomer shooters, are a hot topic. These games feature 90s shooter mechanics with pixelated graphics to keep old gamers like me entertained who are tired of playing thousands of Call of Duty and Battlefield games. Interestingly, most of these boomer shooters are made by small, independent studios, and sometimes by one-person teams. Now, Gravelord, one of the most anticipated boomer shooters of recent years, has been released in early access and claims to offer the most perfect experience of the 90s shooters. The studio that made this game, Fatbit Games, which is based in Slovakia, consists of only 6 people who have published 2 games so far, and Gravelord is their 3rd game. The studio says that it was inspired by Doom and Quake to create this game and tried to complete their successful formula with more modern graphics and a series of modern elements. Even like Doom and Quake, the face of the main character of the game is always shown in the middle of the screen, and the less you have, the more wounded and bloody his face becomes. According to the studio that created Gravelord, one of the most important parts of 90s shooters that is no longer given much attention these days is the presence of a sinister main character like Duke Nukem, who not only humiliates your enemies with his 24-hour chatter, but also reinforces the player's sense of power and invincibility. The story of Gravelord, as its name suggests meaning Lord of the Graveyard, is about a cemetery guardian who, like his father and ancestors, is responsible for guarding and burying the dead. But apparently, someone who was also his father's murderer is providing the dead with a special drink so that they can bypass death and come back to life. Naturally, this makes Gravelord's job difficult. Now, as the Lord of the Graveyard, you must pick up your shovel and go after this mysterious person. During the game, you can collect a series of comic books from the ground, which you can read to learn more about the game's story. At the very beginning of the first stage of the game, you will notice two of Gravelord's most important strengths. One is its colorful and attractive graphics, which, while very similar to old games, presents a cool, dark environment full of colorful lights in front of your eyes. In general, visually, Gravelord is very similar to the second part of Project Warlock, which is a combination of a sense of nostalgia with modern elements. The next thing is the game's sound. The weapons in the game are, as we expected, loud, noisy, and quite ear-splitting, and even other sounds, such as the sounds of enemies, their fragmentation, and the bell that sounds every time the game is saved, all promise a special experience. Along with all this, the snippets of the game's main character also remind you of how insignificant and insignificant your enemies are. Perhaps we can consider the only weak point of the game in this section to be its music, because most boomer shooters have heavy and exciting metal music that makes the game more interesting, but in Gravelord there is no special music. Your first and most important weapon in this game is the shovel. Yes, the same tool you use to dig graves. This shovel is not just a weapon, it also has many magical abilities that you can activate with the cards you pick up from the ground. When the game developer said that they added a series of modern game elements to Gravelord, we didn't really understand what he meant until we picked up the first card from the ground. Yes, Gravelord also has a series of roguelike elements, and every time you pick up a card from the ground, you can upgrade your abilities and put a new card on the brim of your hat. For example, you can place your shovel on the ground to strike lightning at all enemies that pass by it, or throw it into an area and then appear there. You may like to always fight with the game's enjoyable shotgun, but you can never put the shovel aside. In fact, this mechanism of movement, or the so-called teleport shovel, is one of its most important features, which you have to use even to progress in the game stages or find secret passages. Speaking of shotguns, it's worth mentioning Gravelord's firearms. The game has 5 firearms, including a Colt, a double-barreled shotgun, a machine gun, a rocket launcher, and finally, an electric weapon, each of which has its own advantages and disadvantages and is useful for certain situations. But with each of these weapons, you can cut zombies and monsters that attack you to pieces and enjoy the sound of blood splatter. The positive point is that all weapons in the game are upgradable, and by upgrading them, secondary firing modes are activated. The level design is one of Gravelord's strengths. Unlike most boomer shooters, the level map isn't confusing, and you don't have to keep trying to figure out what door opened where after you hit a button. All the levels, at least the ones in early access, are very carefully and cleanly designed, and I never really felt lost or frustrated during the game. At the end of each level, like all boomer shooters, you're shown statistics that tell you how many of the game's secrets you've found, what percentage of enemies you've killed, and how many items you've picked up. Finally, we should also mention the technical discussion of Gravelord. This game requires about 4 to 5 GB of space to install, and even with a weak system with an old generation Core i5 processor, 8 GB of RAM and an onboard graphics card, you can easily run it, so there are no concerns about the frame rate or smooth running of the game. The early access version of Gravelord will soon be released for PC, which has 8 levels. The developer studio has promised that in the final version of this game, in addition to more levels, the level editor section will be added, with the help of which you can design different levels for the game yourself. Gravelord, although currently in early access, promises to be a great classic first-person shooter experience. All the elements that made Doom and Quake successful are included in this game, and a series of new mechanisms such as roguelike elements and the ability to upgrade weapons and abilities have been added to it, but Gravelord is a classic shooter under its new shell. There is no reloading, your health does not automatically replenish like in Call of Duty, and you have to look for colored keys to open the doors in front of you. Most importantly, the main character, with his snippets of words and humiliation of monsters, makes it feel like you are playing Duke Nukem or Blood for the first time, so if you want to relive the gaming experience of your childhood, do not miss Gravelord. If you want to wait until the final version, you can go to its closest competitor, which is the game Hellbound. Since we reviewed the early access version of this game, we are not giving it a score, but if the same quality is maintained in the final version, it is unlikely that it will receive a score lower than 8.5 from me.
If you like this video, like it now, and become a member of our family by pressing the subscribe button. Activate the bell so you never miss our interesting videos.
Huh? I'm an undertaker, not an exterminator.